So I'm going to watch this anti-camping case. Sorry if the sound is shit. I'll try and figure that out later. The woman that's about to be speaking, I am enjoying her so far. This part made me laugh. Okay.
What it is. I agree there might be other cases in the Ninth Circuit that are not rational. And I don't mean to throw aspersions at those holdings, but some of them are not permitting time, place restrictions. Let's go beyond that. Let's go here. Here you're not precluded from prohibiting fires. You're not precluded from prohibiting tents. What's at issue is, are you prohibited from having someone wear a blanket anywhere in the city?
This part is already frustrating me because they've talked about blankets over and over, but ultimately it's like, all right, well, if I were homeless and needed to keep warm, needed a quote-unquote blanket, I would tape pieces of cardboard together. I would say, no, I'm resting my jacket on my lap. There's so many, like, people get frustrated with people who study philosophy because they're like, oh, y'all need to dig into everything. But it's like, okay, what's a blanket, though? Like,
your intent was to remove, stated by your mayor, intent is to remove every homeless person and give them no public space to sit down with a blanket or lay down with a blanket and fall asleep.
That's not the...
You can't call it a public space if it's not accessible to the public. It's a private space at that point.
End of the line. I would like to address that point because the other side...
Why don't you answer the basic question?
Yes. So
it's not about fires. It's not about tents. It's about not being a time and place restriction, about eliminating all choices.
So we think that it is harmful for people to be living in public spaces, on streets and in parks, whatever bedding material.
Yeah, fair. There's a liquor store near my house, and there's another one like 2 blocks further. Actually, it's a little more than 2 blocks. And I will go to that one if I ever want something, because I get harassed at the other one.
When humans are living in those conditions, we think that that's not compassionate, and that
it's not, but neither is providing them with nothing. Well, to alleviate that situation.
This is a difficult policy question, Justice Sotomayor. It is.
Where do we put them if every...
To be fair, I think that what the... I'm so sorry that I don't know their names. I have known this case was coming up, and I'm just kind of jumping in. But maybe what this woman is saying is, if we say, no, you can't be sleeping on public street, then the housed public, the public, as far as this case is concerned, like, let's just call it the public, is implied, like people with housing. If we're saying can't sleep on public streets, or you can't access these public streets, well, then they're not public. She makes a fair point. Like, maybe then there would be actual sustainable changes. But again, I'm just kind of hopping in. But to say, no, it's not compassionate to let this happen. And when that slam dunk, like, well, there's nothing. Yeah. Like, I'm curious to see if she's going to take that somewhere.
Every village, every town lacks compassion and passes a law identical to this.
This is where Kant's universalism, Immanuel Kant, who was said something along the lines of, like, if I want to know if something's good or bad, I just think, if everyone in the world did this thing that I'm doing, would I still appreciate my surroundings? Would it still be a good place from my own perception if everyone did this thing?
Are they supposed to sleep? Are they supposed to kill themselves not sleeping?
So this is a necessity defense, as I mentioned, under Oregon law, is available. States are able to address these concerns. This is a complicated policy question. We believe that the Eighth Amendment analysis, to go back to it, focuses on the low level.
Eighth Amendment, no excessive fines, no cruel and unusual punishment.
So complicated about letting someone somewhere sleep with a blanket in the outside if they have nowhere to sleep. The laws against defecation, the laws against...
Okay, I just have to stop it because, that feels ignorant. That feels like if you were a business owner in a neighborhood that was kind of, had a lot of transient people, that did have a lot of transient people, or people that choose to be homeless, that just feels ignorant. Like, yeah, that's the problem. There is a problem. Mental health and addiction, like,
keeping things unsanitary around yourself, those have all been upheld. The only thing this injunction does is say you can't stop someone from sleeping in a public place without a blanket.
Why don't you answer and then we'll move on.
you can't stop someone from sleeping without a blanket. I don't think that wording was right. That would mean if somebody fell asleep without one, you'd have to say, hey, you, where's your blanket? You have to have a blanket if you want to be asleep. I don't care if it's summertime, get your blanket on.
The next round, and you can be thinking about an answer to Justice Sotomayor while we move into a different stage of the argument. Is being a bank robber a status?
Probably a white guy, let's say that. Because, it's really hard.
No, I would say that a law, if your question
Sorry,
is
backing
asking...
up. I talked
Is being
to
a bank robber a status?
No, I would say that
I'm into this so far.
if your question is asking, would it be permissible to punish being a bank robber, I think that would have vagueness problems, probably.
Well, it would be someone who robbed a bank. That doesn't sound vague.
Well, I don't think that it is a status in the sense of Robinson, which, again, I want to just...
Robinson, I need to look more into, but apparently it discussed the idea of if addiction is a status or if it's a conduct, to my understanding.
Focus on what we think Robinson stands for, and it's only its narrow holding about addiction, and it was the status of being an addict without any mens rea. So a law like that, without any actus reus, a law like that is problematic without an actus reus. I think it would probably have vagueness problems, due process problems. However, the Eighth Amendment, this entire exercise under Robinson, is the only time this court has ever...
Sorry, I got lost there with my boxes. Actus reus, action or conduct, which is a constituent element of a crime. Interesting. As opposed to the mental state of the accused. It's the element of a crime, not a mental state. Okay, all right, interesting.
Evaluated the substantive criminal law, and it raises all of these line drawing problems. And the fact that I'm not here to defend Robinson as a matter of first principles, we don't agree with it. We think it was wrongly decided. We're just saying that it is so far removed, that our laws are so far... And the fact that I'm not here to defend Robinson as a matter of first principles, we don't agree with it. We think it was wrongly decided. We're just saying that it is so...
Pausing. Robinson addiction case. Robinson, California in 1962. Damn, we're going back. It's unconstitutional for a state to punish a defendant for drug addiction, which is a status rather than an act. Or in this case, I guess we would call that conduct. Interesting.
Are removed, that our laws are so far removed from what was at issue in Robinson that it just isn't implicated here.
So if someone is homeless for a week and then finds available...
Okay, this book is so you.
All right, ad going on. Our case is so far removed from Robinson. It's just hard to say that because one can't say, here's a person who is homeless, and then also just right away say it has nothing to do with Robinson, because statistically we know that a lot of homeless people are drug addicts. So it doesn't necessarily, it's not inherent that they go hand in hand, but realistically, what we're dealing with is the fact that, yeah, Robinson almost does go hand in hand with an anti-camping case. Like, of course, that seems bonkers.
Under federal law, the HUD regulations, he is actually considered homeless. That shows the fluidity and the different ways.
Putting the HUD regulations to one side, can someone who is sleeping in a shelter be considered homeless?
HUD, I've worked at shelters, and I remember HUD, it's like Housing Development, Department of Housing and Urban Development is HUD. I guess they're federal regulations.
Some would say yes, that someone.
What would you say?
I would say that at that point he is sheltered and homeless. I think that is.
Well, let me make it easier. What if he buys a home or finds a home or is given a home? Is he homeless at that point?
He is not. So for what's at issue in this case.
So you think the status of homelessness can change from one time to another?
Yes, I do. I think it's very fluid.
Is that consistent with the definition of status in Robinson?
No, so Robinson treated addiction as a disease and as something that, and many believe that addiction is something that someone has with them forever, and it's a struggle. So that is a very different situation. And here, if someone has shelter, let's say they were offered shelter yesterday and they refused it, and then today, when someone comes around and tells them that they're not permitted to camp, are they involuntarily there if they refused shelter yesterday? That's the question the Eighth Amendment does not answer. This is very complex. What if there is a bed available in the...
But we have separation of church and state, and to my understanding, in this county, the only shelter nearby requires that they give up their pets, that they quit nicotine, as well as, I'm pretty sure it's a religious situation. I'm pretty sure on that.
Possible rescue mission, but like Ms. Johnson, a person doesn't wish to leave their pet. Her Rottweiler's not permitted there. So that is a difficult question for a person and a difficult policy question. But
for her to only bring up the pet situation, like the amount of times that they're like, oh, these people would rather be with their animals, it's like there's definitely other things that are less, things that you would not like to come to light. That would be more interesting to talk about than, yeah, like I would be homeless with my pet, pretty damn sure. I can't say because I have never been homeless, but I can't imagine being like, I'd rather have a roof than my dog.
Thank
the
you.
Person's status, yes.
Thank you, Counsel. Justice Thomas?
Robinson actually included a crime of, as I read it, either to use narcotics or to be addicted to the use of narcotics. And the court was concerned about the status of being addicted to the use. Is there a crime here for being homeless?
No, there is not.
Justice Alito?
Robinson presents a very difficult conceptual question. Do you think that someone who is a drug addict is absolutely incapable of, that all people who are drug addicts are absolutely incapable of refraining from using drugs?
Check this out. I'm going to show you how I... Okay, you ready? All right, 108.
I think that for some that may be true, and for some perhaps they can abstain, but that's a question of free will and agency that's true of every law and what conduct we choose to regulate. That's
all right. Then compare that with a person who absolutely
I'm gonna look up right fast the definition of conduct, the manner in which a person behaves. Okay, fine. Especially on a particular occasion or particular context. The manner in which, it doesn't say a person chooses to behave. I guess that's what I wanted there, but okay.
There's no place to sleep in a particular jurisdiction. Does that person have any alternative other than sleeping outside?
so I think we'd have to ask all of the questions I mentioned earlier about what alternatives they might have had yesterday.
No, they have none. They have absolutely none. There's not a single
Why does this woman feel like, and you know, I want to have girl power and be like, whatever this one says is right. I won't do it. Partly just because I cannot, but I know it wouldn't be productive anyways. But just, yeah, like, I get that sometimes they ask her a question. Like some time ago, she was like, "Oh, well, it's more fluid than that. Homelessness is more fluid than that." And the question she'd been asked did feel frustrating. Like, that feels a little too black and white. Can't be answered that way. We would obviously rather it be that simple, but you know, this woman talking was like, "Well, it's fluid." Sometimes I'm like, "You get it, girl. You make this complicated. You don't answer that question exactly. You gotta test this one out." But moments like this, just like, I don't see where she's coming from on this. That's all. That's really all I'm saying, is that I don't see where she's coming from right now.
place where they can sleep.
If that's true, then that may be the case. And in that case, at least in Oregon, they would have a defense of necessity.
So the point is that the connection between drug addiction and drug usage is more tenuous than the connection between absolute homelessness and sleeping outside.
Well, I think in Robinson, again, the court did draw that line, but here the respondents are saying that the two are really the same, that camping outside, sleeping outside, and being homeless are two sides of the same coin. We think that that's wrong. It's collapsing the status that they claim into the conduct. So we think the conduct here is very clear because it applies generally to everyone. The law does not say on its face it is a crime to be homeless. I just want to make that
All right, thank you.
very clear. Thank you.
Justice Sotomayor?
It was the brief of criminal law and punishment.
But the law also says separation of church and state, and if you're saying they can only use necessity law to be able to sleep outside, we've got some problems.
And scholars that I was referencing earlier. I want to go back to Justice Thomas's beginning question. As I understood it, the Ninth Circuit never reached the excessive fines question presented by this case, correct?
That's correct.
So that's still open.
I know from working for some attorneys in, a while back, that, yeah, tickets for like smoking weed in public are just like a thing. It's very interesting too, because we just had the video of the DA, as in her in her words, the DA out of California, who, you know, whatever, just write me the ticket, and it's like, yeah, not only is she prosecuting herself, but whatever the fine is, like, she doesn't care. Like, that's what money does, is, okay, well, it's my time that I'm actually worried about, because say this ticket is $100 and I get paid $200 an hour at work. I'm definitely not saying that's what, you know, DAs get paid. I have no idea, actually. Seemed like maybe she's, anyways. It's like, yeah, it's my time that's more valuable here, because I'd be making more money at work than I would getting this ticket, right? Whatever, so.
You didn't seek cert on that issue.
That's correct.
All right. Assuming that there is no standing, I understand one of the appellees died. The one who was camping outside died during the pendency of this appeal.
I know I'm kind of smiling right now, and someone has died, and that's sad. I feel like an asshole saying that because I feel condescending, like, but I know I'm smiling, and it's just like, oh, if that person's death is like putting an edge on this case, you know, like, oh, this is something we need to address, because literally one of the people is already dead.
And there are two other named plaintiffs. I know they have fines on them. I'm not sure that either of them has any criminal crimes charged against them. Where does that put this appeal? Where does that put this case?
Sure. Well,
Should we be vacating and remanding to see if there is?
I never thought as a pediatrician.
No. A live plaintiff, a named plaintiff who is still suffering injury?
No, so here, the sleeping ordinance, which is the one that Ms. Blake challenged, That is no longer in the case. That ordinance limited only.
Do we have anyone that's still suffering injury? I'm assuming that the fatal injury to one of the appellants who's died. Appellant? Am I saying that right? Anyways, my bad if I'm not. Yeah, if like there's someone running around stabbing people with knives and say that knife is hypothermia, then like, yeah, that person's still out there stabbing and we know what group they're stabbing. Like, yeah, there's some suffering going on.
Sleeping in certain rights of way and sidewalks in the city, and it was a different law, and that's not at issue here. So sleeping is not at issue. It's about the camping ordinance. And we
It's about the blanket. It's about the blanket. Like, okay, well then your whole community can just get really thick pants. Let's talk about really thick pants next. Let's just really dive in, while we're here. Just shit or get off the pot, right? Like camping. We talked about cars earlier. I didn't hear that whole discussion, or maybe that's later on. I've been jumping around with this, but let's dive in harder.
Case because we are under the Ninth Circuit's injunction, and the named plaintiffs
The question is, could it give an injunction? Are these people? Well, I guess if they're not permitted to park.
That's
so
correct.
It's not the camping, it's the parking, isn't it?
Well, in the camping, so we intend to rely on these laws. We want to be able to rely on the.
I went ahead and looked up injunction just because it's one of those words that I'm like, I'm pretty sure I understand. A judicial order that restrains a person from beginning or continuing. Restrains a person from beginning an action. Whoa. Well, yeah, that's interesting here though. Threatening or invading the legal right of another, or that compels a person to carry out a certain act to make restitution to an injured party. Okay, the reason I think that's interesting is because of the beginning part and because of the invading the legal right of another part. I don't know, we know that that's a shady area in America after the gay marriage thing, right? Like, okay, this straight-laced, bigoted person, straight person is like, oh, well, their gay marriage is invading the legal right of my marriage to be the most important. It's interesting.
Laws, they're very important. And
just focus on my question.
Yes.
Both these people sleep in cars. Both of them sleep in cars outside of the town. So they're not seeking camping permission. Is your city not provide for overnight parking in any location at night except in private homes?
camping in a vehicle is included in the camping ordinance.
Well, that's going into a camp. How do you define camp?
Again, it is.
I've definitely heard this part, like in a clip, a several minute clip, so I'm tempted to skip this. I may just take a break for a minute. Okay. So yeah, I guess part one or whatever. But the place where I'm watching this, I tried PBS and there was some sort of like weird voice overlay, like something was wrong with the broadcast. Maybe it was on everyone's, every channel, but I switched over to Reuters, Reuters, Reuters. Live, U.S. Supreme Court anti-camping laws that impact homeless people in Oregon. And it's just so funny because it's right there in the title, like, that impact homeless people. And the Supreme Court is sitting there going like, well, who is that? And is that even a thing? Like, we know people are homeless, but, oh, cute. That's cute. I've had a coffee stain. I wonder, hopefully I at least did this after I bought my coffee this morning. Like happened at the dog park. Anyways, okay. Well, I don't want to hear anything about me going to the dog park because I understand, but I don't have a backyard and stuff. Anyways, okay. Well, speaking of homeless, just like, I don't have a backyard, so it's easy for somebody with a backyard to be like, no. But I know there's other people who also don't have backyards that are anti-dog park, so I'm just saying. Also, I'm very excited to see whatever happens with the DA lady. Can I just go off on a tiny tangent about that real fast? Just real fast. I want to know what she put in her house. I'm not saying I saw anything in her hand or whatever, but she did just like, you know, that's what people do is, oh, I'm right around the corner. And I saw an interview with a cop once where he's like, oh, yeah, as soon as somebody says, I just live right up here, I'm like, oh, game on. So when she said that, I was like, oh, shit. And whenever the one cop is like, oh, I'm going to give you discretion, like it's your traffic stop. And then I just don't know why he chose to go that route. It just felt like he's maybe the cop whose stop it was, you know, the first guy to try and pull her failed stop, I guess, because they were in her garage, couldn't even get her out of the garage. Didn't want her to be a martyr. That's what we're doing now. We're just avoiding giving these people the ability to be a martyr, which means avoiding holding them accountable. To be accountable is to be victimized in the eyes of a lot of Americans right now. I'm not going to say a lot. Not enough to win an election. But they stole it. Anyways. Okay. Well, y'all have a lovely day. Here's hoping that, what's her name? That's right. DA lady. I don't even know your name. Gets her butt kicked a little bit. Obviously not physically. Oh my God. Okay, bye.